May we pray. Holy God, open our eyes to what you would have us see. Open our ears to what you would have us hear. And open our hearts to those whom you would have us love. Amen. Well, even though I am no longer school age, these early fall days always feel like back to school for me. I wonder if you feel the same. Today here in church, as we listen to the gospel reading, we may find ourselves in a back-to-school frame of mind. Jesus is in full-on teaching mode, and this is not an intro-level course. If you came into church today without having heard or read the earlier parts of Luke's gospel, I'm afraid you're being thrown in the deep end. This is an advanced level discipleship teaching. There are prerequisites for this course. The gospel writer Luke is assuming that you have been along for the healing of the sick and the casting out of demons, for the parables, for the lifting up of the poor, the women, and the outcasts, and for the glorious tales of the kingdom to come, the great banquet at which all people are welcome. So far in the gospel story, Jesus' call to new followers has not mentioned a cost. The disciples have multiplied to 70 missionaries who have been sent out by pairs into the local towns. They have reached the multitudes with their teaching. Thousands gather around Jesus. They can't get enough of him. But now it is time to find out what the followers are really made of. It's time to teach them that following Jesus comes with a cost. And so he delivers one of the most challenging messages of the gospel. Anyone who comes to me but refuses to let go of father, mother, spouse, children, brothers, sisters, yes, even one's own self, can't be my disciple. Jesus cautions the enthusiastic crowd to count the cost of following him. This includes letting go of all attachments, even to family members, even to all their possessions, even their attachments to their very own selves. We might begin to think that this is a strange, new, egotistical Jesus. He's making some serious demands on the disciples. We generally associate leaders who make these sorts of demands with modern-day cult leaders like Jim Jones. In 1978, Jones convinced 900 of his followers to take cyanide-laced punch and to die. If today's teaching was the first thing we'd heard about Jesus, perhaps we would imagine him as an egotistical cult leader. Yet we have heard how Jesus has gone about the countryside, serving the poor, healing the sick, and lifting up the brokenhearted. So how can we possibly see him in this light? Instead, we have to look a little more deeply into where this teaching is coming from. Perhaps it has more to do with our egos than with his. In the first chapter of the book, Breathing Underwater, Richard Rohr says, "What ego hates more than anything else in the world is to change, even when the present situation isn't working or is horrible." We know that Jesus was all about change in order to bring about God's great vision for the world, that banquet of inclusion. So, is this us? Are we the ones who hate for the world to change, even when the present situation is not working? Rohr also says ego hates to admit powerlessness over a situation. And yet Jesus admitted utter powerlessness under the Roman Empire as he was taken to the cross and crucified. And yet, is this us? Do we hate to admit powerlessness over the situations in our lives? And Rohr also says the ego defines itself by its revulsions and attachments. And yet Jesus let go of all attachments, turning toward the cross to bring life to the world. And on the other hand, we find it so difficult to let go of our attachments and revulsions. Rohr goes on to say, mature spirituality is all about letting go, both of what we love and what we hate. Rohr says your ego is always attached to mere externals. It has no inner substance of itself, whereas the soul does not attach and it does not hate. It desires and loves and lets go. We all have an ego, of course, and it's better to have a healthy ego. Our ego knows who we are and helps us to differentiate from others, creating effective boundaries. People with fragile egos need to validate themselves, and they cannot handle criticism or rejection. They do not know who they are apart from the others they depend on. But what we need to learn as we grow up is to keep our egos in the right place. We need to master our egos rather than allowing our egos to rule us. This is our goal in letting go of our attachments. We do not become less loving when we let go of family and loved ones and our other attachments. We learn to love in a self-differentiated way. But if we are attached so strongly to a substance or a habit, to a friendship, to a group, or a way of doing things that we cannot let go, that attachment becomes an addiction. And we are powerless over addictions. In the Breathing Underwater Companion Journal, Rohr says, we are all spiritually powerless, not just those who are physically addicted to a substance. Alcoholics' powerlessness is visible for all to see. The rest of us disguise it in different ways and overcompensate for our hidden addictions and attachments. This week, I sat with my spiritual director and made a confession. I am attached to being successful. I really want to be successful. A successful pastor, a successful parent, successful in all I do. Until this week, I had not spoken out loud about this attachment. I had kept it hidden. Ironically, as I thought about letting go, I descended into a rabbit hole. I became attached to being successful in letting go of being successful. You may like the idea of having a pastor who is committed to being successful. This may seem like a positive quality, especially if my definition of success means revitalization of the church. You may want to buy into this attachment, but ultimately it will not serve us very well. I have to admit that I am powerless over my attachment to success and revitalization of this church. I do not have the ability to reach into the hearts of our neighbours and stir them to get out of bed on Sunday mornings and come to worship. I do not have the ability to change the busyness in the culture or the habits that lead people to overcommit and burn out. Nor do I have control over you, O congregation. I can't impose my ideas for change on you if that's not what you want. And that is the way things ought to be. The directions and decisions of this church belong to the congregation. All I can do is try to lead us all in Jesus' teachings for our time and place. I can encourage us to let go of our attachments to particular goals and outcomes, and to listen to the desires of God for us and for our church. And this is something we will practice in the coming months during our discussions on the reality of where we are now and options for the future. And so I invite you to consider for a moment, what are you attached to in your life? Is there a substance you use to numb yourself when life becomes too much. A pint of ice cream at bedtime after a co-worker made you feel small, or draining the bottle of wine in the fridge after a stressful commute. Do you feel powerless to resist and deal with those stresses in more healthful ways? Or is it a so-called friendship that isn't working? A one-way relationship, someone who receives but does not give? Are you shortchanging your soul because you feel trapped by this person? Or do you feed the imbalance because you couldn't imagine life without them? We humans are not only attached and deny our powerlessness on an individual level, we are also addicted and deny our powerlessness on a communal level. We are powerless to stop an active shooter in a place of worship, or in a shopping mall, or in a school in these first days of the school year. This sense of powerlessness is so frightening that we come up with myths to convince ourselves we can control the situation. We say that a good guy with a gun can stop a bad guy with a gun. We forget that we can't tell a good person and a bad person by looking at them. We forget that seemingly good people can become violent people, sometimes overnight, under certain circumstances. And still, there is the collective power to stop the epidemic of mass shootings in our culture today. This could happen if we citizens admitted our powerlessness and let go of our attachments to our arguments, our weapons, our traditions, our insistence on being right. Once we are ready to let go of our political ideals and differences and sit down at the table together, then we could discover the power to end this epidemic of violence. Well, church, today we have begun the first of the 12 steps to free a life with God. We have considered Jesus' teachings on letting go in light of these steps. And we have done this first step, what the first step in Alcoholics Anonymous or another 12-step program say is, we admitted our powerlessness over our attachments, that our lives have become unmanageable. Do you have the image? Great, thank you. So I invite you to take away this image of the hand letting go of the rope that is being pulled away. The owner of the hand is powerless to resist. The rope is being pulled by an irresistible force. If the hand continues to hold on, it will become cut and burned by the rope. But if the owner of the hand admits their powerlessness and lets go, they will be free. Wollaston Congregational Church, we are invited to count the cost and become advanced level students and followers of Jesus. May we all have the courage to let go. May all God's people say, Amen.